Kelly held the suit at her side and aimed the flechette rifle with her other arm. As soon as the medical bay started to pressurize, Carb walked to the middle of the room and took up a covering position for the door. They both saw the flashes from Dickerson's rifle and knew the things were coming at them. "Dickerson," Carb said, "I'm covering the door. Make sure you're not between those things and me."
"Copy,"
Dickerson said, sounding out of breath.
"I got one, but there are a lot more on their way."
Kelly tried to drown out the chatter, but it was preferable to the sound of her heart's rapid beat thumping in her ears. She sent Elliot a block message, essentially an alarm to go off in his head. If he didn't wake up in a few seconds, she'd have to pull him out of the auto dock and stuff him into the suit. Her HUD lit with a green status. The medical bay had 0.7 atmospheres of pressure. "Carb, we need—"
"They're here, boss."
Kelly let go of the suit and turned to face the door. The pine cones floated past the doorway and into the room. She activated her targeting package and her HUD lit with 10 targets. 10? Where the hell were these things coming from? Carb waited until they made it past the doorway and fired. The moment the round left the barrel, the creatures broke apart from their formation. The flechette hit the wall and exploded into electrified shards that bounced harmlessly toward the ceiling.
"What the fuck?"
she yelled. She didn't know how the things were propelling themselves, but Callie was certain they moved faster in an atmosphere than a vacuum. They also seemed to be more intelligent than she'd first thought. The cluster was reforming in a more spread out formation, the creatures apparently realizing a tight grouping made them more vulnerable. Cursing, she fired a round at the closest pine cone. The creature disappeared in bright arcs of electricity. Her audio sensors filled her ears with the sound of an explosion and crackling. One down, but the 9 remaining were all heading toward a single target, the auto dock. Carb fired another shot and vaporized one of the trailing creatures. The group spread out more, varying their attitude and altitude.
"What the fuck are these things?"
Carb yelled. Kelly said nothing. Dickerson's growl filled her ears, and another of the pine cones disappeared in a flare of blue lightning and fragmented metal. Mind on autopilot, Kelly stepped sideways and fired again. She was 2 meters away from the auto dock, and she meant to get right next to it if she could. Despite the adrenaline rushing through her veins, she calmly aimed, led the target, and fired. Another pine cone disappeared.
"Corporal, you're in my sights,"
Dickerson yelled. "Tough shit," she said, and fired again. The shot went wide and struck the wall with a screech of metal and an impotent pop. "Have to get to Elliot before they do." Carb fired, and another pine cone went down. Then the swarm, school, whatever the fuck you called it, completely split apart. The 6 remaining creatures flew in different directions, one of them streaking at Carb, and still another at Dickerson.
"Fuck you!"
Carb yelled and fired. Her shot missed. The creature was no more than a meter from her when she turned her rifle and brandished it like a club. It darted at her with terrifying speed. Carb flexed her knees and swung. The rifle butt smacked into the creature with a crunch, the force sending it flying end over end through the ZG to hit the wall. Fragments of its exterior puffed out like a cloud of dust. Kelly fired again and missed again. The pine cone seemed to have figured out how to avoid her aim. She followed Carb's example and waited. The nearest pine cone was high above her, floating near the ceiling. As she watched, the creature quickly rotated to point its single claw directly at the auto dock bubble. "Come on, fucker," she whispered as it approached. Her HUD lit red with target warnings. 3 more of the things were coming at her. One at a time, she thought. One at a time. It seemed to know what she was trying to do and floated backwards toward the wall while descending. If she followed it, she'd find herself cornered by the other creatures. Bastard, she thought. She turned the weapon back around, switched to explosive rounds, and fired at the ceiling above the pine cone. The round hit the Atmos steel deck and detonated. The shockwave knocked the creature toward her. Kelly flipped the rifle and swung. The butt cracked the creature's shell and flung it to the floor. Its claws slashed at empty air before she raised a mag boot and crushed it. Her head flashed with more urgency. Several of the things were no longer coming. They were on her. One smacked her helmet with a dry crack followed by the shriek of metal. She ducked and then sprang into the air by reversing polarity on the boots. The top of her helmet struck the creature's bottom and sent it flying to the ceiling. She She heard a flechette rifle fire a half-second later. Following the targets on her HUD, she flipped in the air and swung her rifle in a wide arc. The butt found another target and knocked it away. The two remaining creatures near her gave up on her as a target and flew directly at the auto dock. Nearly 3 meters above them, she watched as their claws found the bubble and went to work. Fragments of the transparent aluminum shielding spread about the air like pollen. "No!" Kelly yelled. Dickerson and Carb rushed the creatures with their rifle butts thrust outward. Before they reached the bubble, one of the creatures turned and flew toward the gap between the two Marines. Just before it passed between them, it changed direction and flew toward Carb, its menacing claw aimed at her visor. Carb screamed something and popped the rifle's butt just in front of her helmet. It struck the creature, knocking it upward to the ceiling. She knelt and fired on it. Kelly hit her jets to help Dickerson with the single creature still on the bubble. She swung her arm to knock it to the wall just as the bubble shattered. Shards of the glass-like aluminum composite spread upward, immediately ramming into Kelly's suit. The force of the autodock's internal atmosphere releasing at once pushed her back to the ceiling. Dickerson, caught in mid-step, leaned backward from the decompression. The creature floated up a half-meter before plunging itself downward toward the autodock and Elliot. Elliot's eyes opened just as the creature floated a few centimeters above his face. His scream filled her helmet. She hit her jets and reached for the creature. It somehow sensed her and moved aside, leaving her to hit the autodock's metal surface with a crunch. She watched as the creature returned to Elliot's face. Still screaming, he tried to raise his arms and push it away. The strange animal rotated, brandished its steely claw, and sank it deep into one of his arms. Blood exploded from the wound, rising in crimson blobs. Shrieking in pain through a wide-open mouth, Elliot writhed and wriggled inside the metal-lipped device. Kelly reached down and grabbed the creature, her useless rifle mag-locking to her side. Through the sensor augmentation in her gloves, she felt the nubs on its body and the strange way its exoskeleton, if that's what it was, resembled metal. Once in her hands, the creature stopped trying to move, its claw retracting back into its body. Elliot screamed again, although whether in pain or shock, she wasn't sure. The creature's claw once again appeared and caressed the air just above Elliot's open mouth. "Dickerson, get him out of there and into the suit!" The autodock's lights flashed red, but not just because of the pressure loss. Elliot's heart rate was treading into arrhythmia. Kelly hit her jets again and floated higher above the Marine, the creature still in her hands. Dickerson pulled the security straps from Elliot's body. Kelly initiated a block connection with Elliot and told him to calm the hell down. He didn't respond with thoughts, but the tension in his body lessened. "Carb, how many more?"
"One more,"
Carb said.
"I have it trapped in the corner."
Kelly turned her head. Sure enough, Carb had her rifle pointed butt out toward a pine cone floating in the corner of the room. She floated a meter from it, matching its altitude. The creature seemed to know it was trapped and had ceased moving. That's too much intelligence for my liking, Kelly thought. She'd rather the creatures just keep attacking. At least then they knew they were dealing with a predator incapable of strategy. What's more, now they had to worry about the fucking things following them around the ship. Dickerson pulled Elliot from the autodock. Without his mag boots, Elliot floated helplessly while Dickerson reached down to grab the EVA suit. They had to get Elliot into it ASAP. She didn't know how Dickerson had patched the medical bay hatch, but he hadn't sounded confident it would hold for long. For a maddening 20 seconds, she clutched the terrifying creature between her hands and watched Dickerson stuff Elliot into the suit. When he finally placed the helmet over his head, the suit puffed out slightly as it filled with atmosphere. A second or two later, she received a block connection. "Corporal, what the fuck is going on? Why?" "Elliot," she said through her block. "Calm down. You're safe." He pointed at the thing in her hands. "What the fuck was that thing doing? My goddamn arm is bleeding." "Calm down, Marine. Right now." The block connection went silent. She could feel his mind trying to push away panic and pain. "Sorry, Corporal," he finally thought to her. "How do you feel?" Elliot's thoughts still had an edge of panic to them, but he was getting it under control. "Like a goddamn spear went through my arm. Also, it's hard to breathe." "Slow down your breathing. The nannies are doing their best to repair your lungs, but it will take a while. You were exposed to vacuum for a second or two when your suit punctured. Punctured? He looked at his left arm. Right. I lost my fucking hand. She winced. But this suit seems okay, even if it's 50 plus years old. Great, he said. I'll try and remember that when I'm bumping around this Hulk. You do that. Does the suit have a radio? Aye, he said, but no one's answering me. Dickerson, she said over comms. I've got him on block. Find his frequency.
Aye, Corporal.
Dickerson said. I need to check on something, Elliot. Stay calm. We have you covered. I'll be back in a second. Kelly broke the connection. Carb, you still have that thing cornered?
Aye, Corporal. Not moving. Is Elliot?
Elliot's fine, Carb. Just worry about the creature.
Aye,
She said, a note of exasperation in her voice.
found it.
Dickerson said.
Damn, but this is old. Sending you and Carb the codes.
Her block lit up with a message. She authorized the frequency and added it to the squad channel. Elliot, you hear me? Rapid chuffs of air filled her ears.
Ah, Corporal. Good to hear you.
I'm sure, she said. Carb and Dickerson are on this same channel.
How you feeling?
Dickerson asked. Elliot raised his right arm and pointed at him.
Like you and I went 3 rounds.
He said. Dickerson grunted.
Then you must not remember the 4th round.
Elliot tried to laugh, but it ended in a coughing fit instead. Kelly's HUD lit up with a warning, and then she was flying backward toward the trauma bay door. She flailed in the air, the pine cone dropping from her hands. She reached for it, but it sped past her and through the entrance to the medical bay. Dickerson's patch had finally failed. No! Dickerson yelled as the patch gave way. He watched helplessly as Mira scrabbled for purchase on the wall with her gloves. As soon as he realized she wasn't going to be able to find a handhold, he released his mag boots and jetted after her. The corporal bounced off the doorway, went ragdoll, and flew out through the trauma center opening. He increased his jets, just managing to keep from flying into the doorway himself, and reached for her. Mira was flipped over, the explosive decompression pulling her head first toward the medical bay hatch. Cursing, he reached out a hand and managed to grab one of her boots before she hit. He sent block commands to the suit to fight against the surge and pulled against the pressure loss. Mira stayed with him, his glove holding her foot in a death grip. When the vacuum finally removed all the air from the medical bay, he cut his suit jets and floated into ZG. He reached out and pulled Mira to him until her visor was just below his. After wrapping an arm around her, he used the suit thrusters to push himself back to the floor. The moment he felt the deck beneath him, he magnetized his boots, the corporal still in his arms.
Jesus!
Carb said.
Your patch give way?
He took in a deep breath and exhaled in a long hiss. You can say that, he said. Corporal, you alive in there?
Yeah,
She said in a groggy voice.
thanks.
An awkward moment of silence passed.
You can let go of me now, Lance Corporal.
Oh, Dickerson said, a flush of red coloring his cheeks. Sorry,
Don't apologize.
she said.
Pretty sure you just saved me from a cracked helmet, but I lost the goddamn pine cone. Same here.
Carb said.
The one I had trapped got dragged out of here, unless it bounced somewhere into cover. Fat chance.
Mira said.
Betting it went down the corridor along with mine.
She pulled her rifle from her side and held it in her hands.
Elliot, you okay to move?
When he didn't immediately answer, Dickerson was afraid he passed out standing upright.
Not sure how far I can walk,
He said.
but I'll try. Fuck that.
Carb said.
I'll ferry you.
She stepped to him and reached for his remaining hand.
We're in ZG, big guy. You don't have to do shit.
Elliot made a sound that started as a chuckle and ended in a guttural cough.
Right.
He said when he was able to breathe.
Just like Gunny taught us. That's the spirit.
Carb said, a hint of mania in the words.
But the real question
She said and faced Mira.
is where do we go next?
Mira turned and walked to the trauma center door. Dickerson watched as she took stock of their situation.
That door is just gone now.
She said in a monotone.
You never told me what you found in the emergency station.
Carb didn't answer. Great, Dickerson thought. Guess I have to be the great explainer. Wasn't good, Corporal, he said. 3 emergency suits, a corpse that asphyxiated before they could get into a suit, and 2 others that died while putting theirs on.
The station didn't have pressure?
Kelly Moore asked.
It did,
Carb said.
but too much, if that makes any sense. No, it doesn't.
Kelly Moore turned to face the Marines.
What do you mean, too much pressure?
Dickerson sighed. I don't think there was any oxygen in the station, he said. The station's micro generator worked. We were able to get a final readout before the shit hit the fan.
And?
Well, Dickerson said, either the AI here went crazy or they suffered a serious malfunction. Either way, the emergency station was flooded with CO2 and not oxygen.
Shit.
Kelly Moore muttered.
You're saying the emergency station suffocated them?
Dickerson nodded. Exactly what we're saying, Corporal. He half expected Kelly Moore to say something about the ship, but she didn't.
Well, the medical bay is fucked. We have to get out of here before more of those things come back. And without pressure, we're going to die here anyway. Might as well make our way to the bridge. Dickerson,
Carb said.
you haven't told her? Told me what?
Kelly Moore asked. He hated being the bearer of bad news. Even worse, it was unconfirmed bad news. He explained what he'd found on the medical bay terminal before the shit hit the fan. The bridge, the communications array, everything had suffered extensive damage at or around the same general time. Kelly Moore said nothing for a moment. The seconds ticked off while Elliot's comms sputtered with the sound of his ragged breathing. Dickerson made a block connection to the wounded Marine. Hey, what's your O2 mix at? When Elliot told him, Dickerson felt a little relief. At least this was one thing he could fix. Increase your O2 up a percentage. Should make it easier on your lungs. A moment later, Elliot's breathing sounded more normal.
Fuck it,
Kelly Moore said.
We're heading to the bridge. Boss?
Carb said.
Forgive me for asking, but why? Because,
Kelly Moore said.
Regardless of the destruction, we might be able to find the data records they sent us to retrieve. Worst case, we get nothing for our trouble. Best case, we get the records and find a way to communicate with Black.
Ah, Dickerson said. Besides, what the fuck else are we going to do? Head to the cargo bay?
I vote no on that one.
Carb said.
Fine with me, boss. Just wanted to know. As you should, Carb.
Kelly Moore pointed to Elliot's original suit.
Let's grab the utility belt and any other supplies we can salvage. Hi, boss.
Carb said. While Carb collected the remaining contents of Elliot's shredded and torn combat suit, Kelly Moore checked her rifle. She ejected the magazine, locked it to her belt, and pulled a fresh one. After slamming it home, she gestured to the others.
I want full mags. I want full combat prep. Those pinecone creatures may be the least dangerous thing on this ship. So let's get ready for anything.
Dickerson followed orders. He peered over Kelly Moore's shoulder at the impossibly dark rectangle that used to be the medical bay's main hatch. Out there in the corridors, at least 2 of the creatures floated free. He had a feeling they'd find hundreds more before this was over.